All right, so, we often see, these big political things happening, right? And it's easy to just kind of get caught up in the immediate story.
Right.
But here, on the deep dive, we like to take a step back, right?
Yeah.
Really trying to understand what's going on beneath the surface.
Yeah.
And what it all might mean, down the road.
Absolutely.
And that is exactly what we're going to be doing today, looking at the conviction of Marine Le Pen in France for misusing EU funds and all the political chaos that has followed.
Exactly. And it's not just about this one particular case, right? What's really fascinating as we get into this is how this verdict has triggered such huge reactions, Yeah. It's really making people question the, direction of French politics and even democracy as a whole.
Right.
It's a big deal.
So to really, get into this today, we've got a bunch of reports we're looking at from the Associated Press, CNN, and Politico EU, all from around April 2025.
Ugh.
And our goal today, for all of you listening, is to kind of cut through all the noise.
Yeah.
And really get to the core of what's being argued.
Yeah.
And most importantly, what are the long-term implications?
Yeah.
Right? Especially as we're looking ahead to the 2027 election.
Absolutely.
We want to make sure you get the key takeaways without having to read a ton of articles yourselves.
Exactly. Give you the shortcut.
Exactly. A shortcut. Exactly.
Yeah.
So let's dive right in.
Okay.
What exactly do the court find Le Pen guilty of?
So the heart of the conviction, as these reports lay out, really boils down to how Marine Le Pen used over 4.5 million euros from the European Parliament between 2004 and 2016.
Okay.
And the court decided that this money was improperly used, basically, to pay staff members of her party.
Okay.
Which back then was called the Front National.
Right.
It's a national rally now.
Right. Yeah.
But the point is, this money was used to pay these staff members who were working in France itself.
Okay.
They weren't working for the European Parliament. Right.
And then she falsely claimed these expenses were for EU parliamentary assistance.
Ah.
Typically these EU funds are supposed to support members of European Parliament in their work as EU representatives.
Right.
They're supposed to cover things directly related to their duties, within the European Parliament.
Yeah.
Yeah. And the presiding judge, really didn't mince words.
Right.
Calling this a democratic bypass.
Wow.
And a serious and lasting attack on the rules of democratic life.
Okay, so this...
Not just within the EU.
This wasn't just like a small financial...
Right, exactly.
Really?
This was a fundamental challenge.
This was a fundamental challenge to democracy.
Exactly.
And the penalties were serious, too, right?
Absolutely. It wasn't just a slap on the wrist.
Right, right.
So she got a 4-year prison sentence, 2 of which were suspended.
Okay.
She also got hit with a €100,000 fine.
Okay.
But probably the biggest thing politically is the 5-year ban from holding any kind of public office.
Right. And this ban went into effect immediately.
Yeah.
So, yeah, as I mentioned, this really throws a wrench into her plans for the 2027 election.
Right, where she was, considered, I think, a frontrunner by many.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. She was widely seen as a top contender.
Right.
So this is a big blow.
So the verdict comes down, big blow to Le Pen and the National Rally, obviously.
Yeah.
How did they respond? I can't imagine they just said, okay, we accept this.
Definitely not. They came out swinging both Le Pen and the National Rally with strong denials across the board.
Okay.
They're basically claiming that this whole thing was politically motivated,
right,
specifically to stop Le Pen from running in 2027.
Okay.
And Le Pen herself, she said to her supporters, and this quote really captures their stance, she said, "This is not a judicial decision, it's a political decision."
Wow.
And Jordan Bardella, the current president of the National Rally, he's saying the same thing, even going as far as accusing the French judiciary of trying to silence the opposition.
Okay, so they're not just saying this quietly, they're actually taking it to the streets, right?
That's right. They organized a big rally in Paris.
Okay.
Now, they called it a demonstration against the verdict.
Right.
But from the reports, it sounds a lot like a campaign event.
Oh, interesting.
People were chanting, "Marine Présidente."
Wow.
They had signs that said things like "justice taking orders" and "stop the judicial dictatorship."
Okay, so they're really trying to rally their supporters.
Well, absolutely.
Project an image of strength, even in the face of this conviction.
Exactly.
It's a bold move.
It is. It's very defiant.
And Le Pen even spoke at the rally, didn't she?
She did, yeah.
Vowing to keep fighting.
Yeah, she told her supporters, "For 30 years, I have fought against injustice.
Okay.
And I will continue to fight."
So really pushing that narrative of being wronged by the system.
Exactly. It reinforces that whole idea of victimhood that they're trying to portray.
Right. And then there were the comparisons to Donald Trump, right?
Yes, that's an interesting angle, you know.
I mean, there were signs, and Trump himself even weighed in.
Yeah, supporters were holding signs that said things like, Trump can run, why not Marine?
Wow.
And Trump himself actually did publicly support Le Pen, calling the ruling a witch hunt.
Really?
Which, you know, very much echoes his own rhetoric.
Right, right.
It's a classic example of what some are calling the Trump playbook.
Right, right.
You know, trying to discredit legal proceedings by claiming political persecution.
Exactly.
And this is something we're seeing more and more, not just in France, but in other countries too.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's a pattern, and it's important to recognize it.
Right.
So you can, you know, critically analyze the information you're getting.
So we're seeing this united front from within the national rally.
Yeah.
But what about the broader reaction in France?
Right.
Surely not everyone's buying into this narrative?
No, of course not. There are definitely different perspectives out there.
Right.
A lot of people outside the national rally see this as a legitimate case of accountability, you know, under the law.
Right.
John Goodman from Syracuse University.
Okay.
He actually questions whether there's really this massive public outcry that the national rally is claiming.
Okay.
He thinks their narrative might not be as accurate as they're making it seem.
Okay. And there were counter-protests as well, right?
Yes, definitely. Several left-wing parties, including the Green Party, organized their own rallies.
Sorry.
And their message was all about defending the rule of law and warning against what they see as a Trumpist turn in French politics.
Right.
Marine Tondelier, the leader of the Green Party, she said, and this is a powerful quote, "This is bigger than Marine Le Pen. It's about defending the rule of law from people who think justice is optional."
Wow.
Their signs said things like, "No Trumpism in France."
So clearly, France is dealing with some deep divisions here.
Absolutely. There's a real split in public opinion.
And I think even some of Le Pen's rivals, you know, political opponents, expressed some discomfort with the situation.
You're right. Even Prime Minister François Bayrou, who's definitely not on Le Pen's side, he said he was troubled by the idea of banning a major political figure from running for office.
Okay.
So even though there's likely support for upholding the law, there are also concerns about what this means for democracy.
Right, when you basically sideline a key political voice.
Exactly. It raises some complex questions.
So the National Rally is pushing this narrative of being targeted, you know, politically, echoing these tactics we've seen elsewhere, you know, like we talked about with Trump.
Right.
What's the goal with this strategy of trying to discredit the judiciary?
Well, they're essentially trying to portray the judiciary as biased, you know, even using terms like judicial coup and political execution.
Right.
Their message is that the legal system can't be trusted to be fair.
Right.
And that the only way to truly know what the people want is through elections. One of Le Pen's supporters put it like this: "The judges wear robes, but they're just politicians in disguise. Let the people decide."
Okay, so they're really going all in on this.
Absolutely. They're appealing directly to the voters, while simultaneously eroding trust in other parts of the democratic system.
Right. That's interesting. And then there's the appeal. Which seems to be happening pretty quickly.
Right. That's another point worth noting.
Yeah.
Le Pen's appeal is actually scheduled for the summer of 2026.
Okay.
Which is, you know, well before the 2027 election.
Yeah.
This fast timeline has made some people think there might be something strategic going on.
Right.
Maybe trying to clear her name before the next presidential race.
Okay.
And John Goodman even mentioned that this timeline is much faster than what's typical for similar cases.
Okay, that is interesting.
Yeah, it definitely raises some eyebrows.
So this conviction has really shaken things up in French politics.
Yeah.
We're even seeing reports that the National Rally might try to bring down the current government.
It's true. They're openly talking about using a motion of no confidence against Prime Minister Bayrou's government.
Right.
Jordan Bardella has said that the government isn't doing much.
Okay.
And another National Rally leader, Sébastien Chenu, has accused Bayrou of trying to wear out members of parliament.
Okay, so they're framing this as a policy disagreement.
Yeah, they're talking about things like energy prices and voting systems.
The timing is pretty suspicious.
Right? Exactly. It's hard not to see this as connected to Le Pen's conviction.
Right. And if they were to succeed with this no confidence motion, what would happen then?
Well, it would likely force President Macron to call for new legislative elections.
Okay.
Maybe even as soon as the summer.
Wow.
But remember, Le Pen herself wouldn't be able to run.
Right, because of the ban.
Exactly.
Okay, and this is a change in tactics for the National Rally too, right?
Right. They haven't really been keen on supporting no-confidence motions in the past.
Okay.
But this conviction seems to have made them a lot more aggressive.
Okay, so with Le Pen potentially out of the picture, at least for now, what does this mean for the National Rally moving forward?
Well, even with the ban, Le Pen still has a huge influence over the party.
Right.
But we are seeing her protege, Jordan Bardella, taking on a more prominent role.
Okay.
Reports describe him as becoming more confident and using stronger rhetoric.
Okay.
He's even told supporters, "We will be here tomorrow, and we will be stronger."
Wow. Okay, so he's ready to step up.
Yeah, seems like it.
And this Sunday rally, it was kind of a test, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was a big test to see if the far right can convince enough people that the justice system is biased against them.
Right, and that they're the only ones who can really give power back to the people.
Exactly, and the outcome of that effort will definitely shape French politics in the years leading up to 2027.
And one thing that stood out to me was that, despite all the National Rally's efforts, the protests in support of Le Pen weren't actually that big.
That's a really important observation.
Yeah.
The rally in Paris drew a few thousand of Le Pen's hardcore supporters.
Good.
But it didn't seem to spark widespread outrage or anything.
Right. No massive nationwide movement.
No, not at all. And this is in contrast to the counter rallies, which also drew thousands of people.
Right. So it really shows how divided France is right now.
It really does. You know, you have these very different views on justice, on authority, on the future of France.
Right. And it's all playing out in these rallies and these slogans and these messages.
Exactly. It's a microcosm of the larger societal conflict.
So to sum it up, the National Rally is really doubling down on this strategy of playing the victim.
Yes, they're framing themselves as being targeted by a system that's rigged against them.
It's a tactic we've seen before, and it seems to be working for them, at least with their base.
Right. They're appealing to their core supporters by tapping into this feeling of being marginalized and unheard.
And this whole situation, with the conviction, the ban, the appeal, it has the potential to really impact the 2027 election.
Absolutely. It's injected a huge amount of uncertainty into French politics.
And it's not just about the election, right? It's about the stability of the French government in the meantime.
Exactly. This has exposed some deep divisions in French society about trust in institutions, about the role of the judiciary, about the direction the country should be going in.
And all of this is going to have a major impact in the coming years.
Without a doubt, it's a story that will continue to unfold.
So as we wrap up this deep dive into the fallout from Marine Le Pen's conviction, it's clear that this is far from over.
Far from over.
We've seen how this one legal decision has created so much political turmoil, exposed these deep divisions in French society, and really thrown the 2027 election wide open.
Absolutely.
And for those of you listening, I hope this has given you a better understanding, not just of the headlines, but of the bigger picture.
A deeper context.
The deeper context, the strategies at play, the societal divisions, and the potential paths that French politics might take.
The different scenarios that could unfold.
Exactly. And, this is something you wouldn't necessarily get just from skimming the news.
Right. This is the deeper analysis.
And it really raises some important questions, for all of us to think about.
Yeah. And one of those questions is, what does this tell us about the balance between the judiciary and political power in a democracy?
Yeah, that's a big one.
And how might this specific case influence populist movements, not just in France, but across Europe and even beyond?
Right. Those are some really crucial things to consider.
Food for thought.
And if you're interested in going even deeper, we encourage you to check out the original reports we talked about today.
Do your own research.
You could also look into the history of the National Rally, how the French judicial system works, or even the broader rise of populism globally.
There's a lot to explore here.
This deep dive is just the beginning, really. So much more to discover. Until next time.
See you then.
Bye.